European leaders today have basically told Donald Trump and his entire team to get lost with their peace plan for Ukraine. Odd G7 groups, Euro institution leaders, Ursula von der Leyen, Antonio Costa and others. European and non-European leaders urgently discussed the peace plan for Ukraine proposed by Washington on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Johannesburg. And after this meeting, they stated directly that the plan requires serious revisions, and in its current form, Ukraine and Europe will never accept it. Most importantly, Europeans made it clear the territorial issue isn't up for discussion and nothing will be given to the Russians. They also added that there should be no reduction of the armed forces of Ukraine, because this is the only real guarantee of Ukraine's security, no matter what Trump and Putin promise. In addition, Europe reminded Trump that implementing elements concerning the European Union and NATO requires their consent. He can't make any decisions there by himself. As a result, Steve Witkoff, who wrote the peace plan with the Russians, was advised by Europeans to see a psychiatrist if he doesn't understand basic things. He even suggests that America should profit from the Russian assets frozen in Europe, even though Americans in general have nothing to do with that jurisdiction. I'll tell you more in the episode about what this is all about. In addition, it is reported that United States Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll, who has now been appointed as Trump's special representative for Ukraine, informed the ambassadors of NATO countries about Trump's team's peace plan. And according to Western media, it was a very grim and distrustful conversation. I'm Alexei Pechiy. Let's discuss this together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and write a detailed comment under this episode. Also subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link is in this video's description. We post breaking news there as it happens. In addition, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. European leaders, Euro institutions and the prime ministers of the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan and Norway said the United States peace plan needs more work and expressed willingness to participate. But only if Washington starts to look at things realistically and not just repeat all of Putin's wishes. Today, all the leaders mentioned above discussed the peace plan for Ukraine proposed by Washington on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Johannesburg. By the way, Trump didn't go there and didn't send anyone from his team either, and after the meeting they published an official statement. But before that, there was a meeting. The E3 is an informal security alliance between France, the United Kingdom and Germany. As you can understand, these are exactly the European countries that possess nuclear weapons or, in the case of Germany, host them on their territory. In the end, the leaders welcomed United States efforts to establish peace in Ukraine. They noted that the initial draft plan of 28 points includes important elements that will be necessary to achieve a just and lasting peace. Quote, "Therefore, we believe that the draft is a foundation that will require further development. We are ready to join this work to ensure a sustainable peace in the future." Well, moving on. The leaders recalled the principle that borders should not be changed by force, and also expressed concern about the proposed restrictions on the armed forces of Ukraine, which would make Ukraine vulnerable to future attacks. Quote, "We reiterate that implementing aspects related to the European Union and NATO requires approval from their respective members. We take this opportunity to emphasize the strength of our unwavering support for Ukraine. We'll keep coordinating closely with Ukraine, and the United States in the coming days." And now here we are. Negotiations between Ukraine, European leaders and United States representatives will take place in Switzerland soon. By the way, Zelensky has already chosen the negotiation team, and they are allowed to make contact with the Russians if the negotiation process requires it. But what exactly do the Europeans want to revise in Trump's plan? They say the plan is not bad, but it definitely needs some work. Reportedly, the Europeans want to revise Trump's plan in at least 4 key areas. First, recognizing Donetsk region and Crimea as Russian is unacceptable for Europe. European leaders stated that borders can't be changed by force, so nothing will be recognized. And the second proposal, to reduce the Ukrainian army to 600,000, is considered risky in Europe, since it could make the country vulnerable. They argue the army shouldn't be reduced. Since Russians can't be trusted, and a promise of security guarantees is just a promise, while the army is a real tool for ensuring security. And from this follows the third point. Europeans find it hard to trust the Kremlin's promises of security guarantees, considering that it has already violated previous agreements. That's why Europeans are, to put it mildly, surprised that Trump is suggesting Europe should simply trust Putin's promises not to attack Ukraine and Europe in the future. And fourth, the future of frozen Russian assets. The European Union is not ready to let Moscow benefit from them, because in Trump's plan it is envisioned that part of the frozen Russian assets will be unfrozen and invested in projects from which Russia could profit. Well, and the Europeans are saying what nonsense, and this last point has caused very loud and intense criticism. European officials sharply criticized the point of the peace plan developed by United States President's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Russian Special Representative Kirill Dmitriev, which involves the use of frozen Russian assets. According to the document, part of these funds should go toward the $100 billion reconstruction of Ukraine. But all of this should happen under Washington's control after the ceasefire. Moreover, the United States plans to receive 50% of the profits from this activity. So the money will go toward the reconstruction of Ukraine. And the Americans say, well, you know, companies will be making money from these $100 billion, so we'd like to have 50% for ourselves. So Witkoff is basically saying, let's just give up Ukraine and then make money off of it too. Well, why not? As Politico writes, European Union diplomats are concerned that the American initiative will disrupt the agreement on the so-called reparations loan for Ukraine at the expense of the Russians. And now about the conversation with the building. A former French official called the proposal scandalous, noting that European countries are trying to find a viable mechanism for using frozen assets in the interests of Kiev, while Washington is trying to profit from it. And, you know, it's actually amazing because let me remind you, Donald Trump actually has no authority to unfreeze Russian assets placed in European jurisdictions. So what is Witkoff even thinking about? And based on this, I'll quote a high-ranking European official, as cited by Politico, Witkoff needs to see a psychiatrist. Well, hinting at whether he even understands what he's saying, what kind of nonsense is this? Let me remind you, this already happened in the summer. That same Witkoff, for example, suggested starting to gradually lift sanctions from Russia and hinted that frozen Russian assets could be unfrozen. For example, we could slightly ease some sanctions. And he stated that if Washington lifts the sanctions, then Europe will automatically lift them as well. In Europe, they asked Witkoff if he understood what he was saying since he had no jurisdiction. Moreover, let me remind you, when Witkoff suggested to Trump to go ahead and unblock some Russian banks and reconnect them to the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication System, that was in the summer too. At the time, everyone in Europe was shocked, and privately people wondered if Witkoff was crazy or an idiot. Why am I saying this? Because the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication System is controlled by and under the full jurisdiction of the European Union, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication headquarters is located in Europe. Accordingly, without Brussels' permission, no one will reconnect anything anywhere. But Witkoff confidently said, listen, we will reconnect it, really, don't worry. So, how confident or how foolish do you have to be for that? It's your choice, really. Now in Europe, they say, you should see a psychiatrist. The issue of using frozen Russian assets is complicated from the start because of Belgium's position, since a significant portion of this money is kept in its territory. Brussels fears retaliation from Moscow. Now, however, European diplomats fear that the American initiative will create additional obstacles to obtaining Belgium's consent for the so-called reparations loan plan for Ukraine. As one official explained, Washington's proposal could be used as a counter-argument against the European scheme. He also noted that Trump's desire to make a profit in this situation corresponds to the classic problem of the American president's position. And the cherry on top. United States Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, who is now Trump's special representative for Ukraine, informed the ambassadors of NATO countries about the United States president's team's peace plan at a meeting in Kyiv, late Friday evening after talks with President Zelensky and a phone call from the White House. And now The Guardian reports that Driscoll directly told the Europeans that Trump expects to push President Zelensky to sign a peace agreement in the coming days, threatening that if Kyiv does not sign it, it will face much worse conditions in the future. And now I'll give a quote. "The mood in the room was gloomy. Several European ambassadors questioned the content of the agreement and the way the United States conducted negotiations with Russia without informing its allies. It was a terrible meeting," it was another argument. "Again, you have no trump cards," said the source, referring to Trump's statement that Zelensky has no trump cards at the scandalous White House meeting in February. But Driscoll responded to the Europeans' criticism like this, quote, "President Trump wants peace now. The more cooks in the kitchen, the harder it is to handle," he said, according to one of the sources present. In the end, Julie Davis, the acting United States chargé d'affaires in Kyiv, stated that although the terms of the agreement are punitive for Ukraine, it has no choice but to accept them or face worse conditions in the future. Well, fortunately, the Europeans are not blindly following Donald Trump, because over there they are starting to talk more and more nonsense. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.